which most of us are. And because of that, they are very useful growth species for people to really get to have first-hand encounter with nature around them. And that's the reason why I co-authored the book, The Wayside Flowers of Singapore, with called John Boon, because I wanted to present the beautiful photos of these plants and also some interesting facts about them. And another cool thing about these plants is that they flower almost all year round. So you get to see their pretty flowers all year round, unlike plants in the forest which don't flower as often. So what I'm going to do, so this is quite exciting because this is the first time that we're having such a virtual tour. And forgive me if I fumble a bit along the way because this is my first time doing this and there are many people around just staring at me. But yeah, let's get started. So what I plan to do is I'm going to walk down. Sorry, let me show you so I'm going to turn the camera away from myself.
And then Louise, if I may say while you're setting up, this is Shawn. Yep. If anybody has questions that you want to ask Louise or anybody else, and I know there's lots of experts in the audience too, just please type your questions in the chat box, and then we can figure something out. Thank you. Thanks, Louise. Sorry.
Thanks, no problem. Yeah, so I intend to walk down this very short path in my neighborhood, and then on the right side, you can see a fence, a green fence, and I'll be stopping to look at some of the wildflowers that are growing along this fence. And then later at the end of the path, there will be a small patch of open bare land, which has been left bare, and basically all kinds of plants have come in. So we'll stop to look at that and talk a bit about it, because there are many of such areas in Singapore where the land has just been left bare, awaiting further development. And after that, I'm going to make a left turn onto the park connector, and then we can have a look at how the sides of the park connector have been planted up with ornamental species, but because of the 2 or 3 month circuit breaker period, a lot of wildflowers have actually come in. So I think most of them have been mowed away by now, but at the end of the park connector, there's a patch that hasn't really been maintained yet. So we're going to look at what flowers you can see on that patch. So before I head down the path, I want to show you, I want to start with some other plants that are just around the manhole over here. Oh, sorry, before that. So something that you can think about along the, oops, sorry, let me just position my camera. Also, something to think about throughout the course of this walk is many of these plants that I'm going to show you are commonly thought of as weeds. So how do you actually define what is a weed? So we commonly think of a weed as a plant that is not been deliberately planted by someone. It actually grows spontaneously on its own, and it is growing somewhere that is not wanted. So the key point about this is that it's a plant that people consider to be unwanted. But on the other hand, is there value in such plants? As there's a famous quote by the American author and poet Ralph Waldo Emerson, which says that a weed is simply a plant whose virtues have not yet been discovered. So I'll leave that for you to think about. So the first one I want to show you is, I think, this plant. This is the touch me not. It's also called the sensitive plant. And another name that I really like for it, which I found out, is a Malay name for it, which is called Putri Malu, which means shy princess. And the scientific name of this plant is Mimosa pudica. So you can recognize it by its pink pom-pom-like flowers. And a very special thing about this plant, which I'm sure you all know, is that when you touch the leaves, they will close up. Can you see that? Yep. So this phenomenon is known as rapid plant movement, and it's a type of movement in plant structures that occurs over a very short period of time. So something similar to this that you can think of is the closing of the trap of the Venus flytrap when the insect lands in it and it wants to catch the insect. So how does this work? The closure of the leaves of the sensitive plant is actually caused by the Venus, which is a swollen leaf base of the leaf stalk. So you can see when I touch it, oops, yeah, it actually acts like a hinge and brings the leaf downwards. So what happens inside the plant is that there's change in the water pressure within the cells, which causes the movement. So the folding out of the leaves can take about 4 or 5, take a few seconds, but the unfolding can take much longer. It can take tens of seconds or up to 10 minutes. And apparently the time to unfold depends on how the plant has adjusted to its surroundings, or how much stimuli it has been receiving. And it's actually thought that this closing up of the leaves costs the plant quite a bit of energy and interferes with photosynthesis. So actually what I did just now, I went around touching all the leaves, is actually a form of plant cruelty because I'm stressing the plant out a bit. So I have a question for you. Maybe you can type the answer in the chat. So why do you think the sensitive plant or the touch me not actually evolved this strategy of closing up its leaves? Another thing is this plant, this folding out of the leaves is also associated with sleepiness or sleep. So apparently in Hawaii, this plant is also called the sleepy grass, and it has many sleep-related uses associated with it. So in some cultures, plants are actually traditionally used to treat insomnia, and the twigs of the plant are actually used to prepare a bath for children who have sleeping problems, or they'll put the twigs under the sleeping mats of children. They'll believe that it might help them to sleep. And I think the belief is associated with how the leaves kind of like go to sleep. So another very common plant that you see over here growing around the manhole. Let me just adjust the camera. You see some butterflies flying around. So maybe later, Anuj, you can talk a bit about the pollination of this plant. So this is the coat buttons. It's another plant that you might see very commonly. You can recognize it by its flowers on long stalks, like this, with white petal-like structures. And the leaves are usually much lower down along the plant. And this plant, I'm sure, did I say the name? Coat buttons or Tridex procumbens is the scientific name. So this is a relative of the daisy and sunflower and dandelion, and it comes from the family Asteraceae. Previously it was called Compositae, so that may be another name that you recognize. And this family is actually quite well represented among the wildflowers that we have in Singapore. And yeah, so the flower heads kind of resemble daisies or wildflower or sunflowers, and the fruit heads may remind you of the dandelion fruit that we read about in children's books, where you kind of blow the fruit head and the seeds fly everywhere. So these fruits and seeds with the fluffy parts actually allow this plant to disperse quite successfully. And another interesting thing is that the flower head, I'm just going to plug it. The flower head that you see, it's actually composed, it's actually not a it's not a single flower, so it's actually a multiple flower. It's composed of many, many small flowers. And it's actually composed of two types of flowers. So the white parts that look like petals are actually not petals in the botanical sense, but they're actually one type of flower called the ray floret. So the white part is the ray floret, and then the yellow part in the middle is called the disc floret. Yeah, so they each have their own male and female reproductive parts. Maybe we can show the PowerPoint now. Yeah, so here you can see the flower close up and the fruits as well.
Okay, so do you want to talk more about the ray and are you okay with this? Can you see my cursor?
Yeah.
Okay, so I think this is what Louise is trying to tell you. These are the
ray flowers or ray florets.
And so it's made out of many tiny little flowers, right?
Yep. So it's not correct to call them petals.
But yes, this is the dandelion or daisy family. Anuj, you want to say something about these butterflies?
Yeah.
Sure. So a lot of us associate butterflies with or wildflowers with fluttering activity because there's so many of them around us, and as Louise was showing in her video, if you just look at it per square meter, there are already many flowers, and that tends to attract a lot of pollinators. Here we see a tiger moth, day-flying moth, which is really common, lesser grass blue butterflies, which is one of the three very common butterflies, and the honeybees. And all of them go for these flowers that are very small and delicate. And so one fun fact is that the pollinators that go for flowers tend to match their length of their mouth parts with the with access to nectar. So simply speaking, butterflies or other insects that have smaller mouth parts only go for shallower flowers, whereas butterflies that have longer mouth parts, or what we call proboscis, will go for deeper flowers that typically have more nectar stored in their in store for them to feed. Yeah, so next time you see a flower and a pollinator, look at the size associations: small flower, small pollinator; big flower, bigger pollinator. Yep.
I guess the other thing I wanted to add, and I'll be very quick, Louise, two things.
Yeah, no
Three perspectives. One from the perspective of the weed, which would be so-called weed, which is what kind of characteristics lend themselves to these plants that allow them to become very prolific and successful in colonizing these very harsh environments and very sometimes temporary or ephemeral environments like this coat buttons or the mimosa that we saw earlier. No answers yet, but that's just a kind of question. Maybe secondly, from the wildlife point of view, if we were to have a landscape that didn't have these weeds, how might that impact the distribution and the abundance of some of these other animals like butterflies and bees, and the services that these same animals eventually will provide in terms of, say, pollinating our vegetables and fruits and so on. And then the third thing, which is linked to maybe what we as a nature society like to think about, is how important would it be to us as people who enjoy nature to have these little, rather than to severely manage the landscape, to have, as Louise is kindly showing us today, a landscape that is actually very diverse and full of beautiful things, both big in our nature areas, but also small, like these wildflowers in our streets and waysides. Okay, all yours, Louise. Sorry, you'll have to mute me soon.
No worries. Look at plants growing on the fence.
And notice how you're the only person, Louise, bothering to take a look at all these beautiful things.
I think everyone's just trying to avoid me because I look weird.
Yeah, they're just looking at their phones. What a waste. What a shame.
Yeah, so over here we have another very common wildflower, This is called the corky passion flower, and it's a close relative of the passion fruit that you may have eaten before. And over here you see some fruits. So the fruits actually start off green and then they ripen to this dark purple color. So I know your next question will be, can we eat this since we can eat the passion fruit? And I found out that apparently the ripe fruits are edible, the ones that are purple. And they are supposed to be sweet. Yeah, so the purple fruits are supposed to be edible and then they're supposed to be sweet. But then they're supposed to contain cyanide when they're green. So don't eat the green ones. And don't quote me when you eat the purple ones also, because I'm not recommending it. I'm just saying what I found out. And maybe I can crush a fruit and show you the inside. So it's not very clear, but yeah. So basically it doesn't have much inside, it's just full of seeds. So you may not want to eat it anyway. Okay, now my fingers are stained purple.
You gonna try eating it, Louise?
No, I'm not.
No, wait until the walk ends, then you eat, just in case.
In case I get a stomachache. Okay, now the flowers. So there's a whole bunch of flowers up here. And so I find this flower structure very interesting actually, because it doesn't look like a typical flower. And so it's kind of alien looking to me, I find. And so in the middle of the flower, you can see the reproductive parts protruding out, like in a cross shape. Maybe later we can show you a photo on the slides, the PowerPoint slides. And then you can also see a structure, a ring-like structure of hairs around the flower, fanning out around the flower. So that's actually called the corona. And that's the word that I think we're all very familiar with now. And it actually means crown.
So Louise, can you put your finger to a corona of that passion flower? So, and again, the reason why it's translated into passion flower, it's a biblical reference to the passion of Christ, who was made to wear a crown of thorns during the passion. And people who described, am I right, Bian, who described this plant, saw the corona reminded the person who described this as the crown of thorns that was worn during the passion. Hence it's called the passion flower or passiflora. Mostly a New World genus, I believe, from the neotropics. Yeah, Louise, about 500 species. We can see cultivated ones. They come in all different kinds of sizes and shapes, and they're very adapted to different kinds of pollinators. So the big, huge red ones that we see are actually bird pollinated, hummingbird pollinated in Central and South America. These, I guess, I don't know, Louise, must be, it look like bee pollinated.
Not too sure actually. Maybe Anuj will know.
Yeah, in fact, several of these species that we have here, Suberosa, Fotida, are exclusively bee pollinated. They tend to be pollinated by xylocopa bees, which are these giant bees with beautiful hues of yellows and blues and so on.
I find it also fascinating, Anuj, I believe this is the food plant for a non-native butterfly, the tawny cluster. Is that right?
Yes. And
so we have a non-native plant that feeds a non-native butterfly.
That's exactly right.
That and aided and abetted these two alien species.
And it is a fascinating story because this butterfly, whose photo we will see later in the slides, has actually naturally expanded its range from the Indian subcontinent all the way to Australia, using this plant as a resource because it's everywhere.
There's also something about the leaf shape of the plant, right? You want to talk about that? And it's like arms raised with the butterfly. It's herbivore.
Bian?
Yeah. As Shawn mentioned, the passion flower genus Passiflora is very large, and most of predators would be caterpillars of many butterfly species. And so there are two things going on. The leaf shape on many of the passiflora species are very variable, and they can take on kind of bizarre, different shapes. So the passion flowers are trying to tell the butterflies, hey, I'm not who you think I am. I'm just this weird looking plant that doesn't look like a passion flower or passion flower leaf. So don't lay your eggs on me. So there's this weird thing going on where the passion vines are evolving many different leaf shapes. Maybe as we go along, even on this same one species, there are these, what we're seeing now are these long linear leaves, but further along, perhaps we can see some that are three-lobed, and it's all within
Yeah.
the same species. So a lot of interesting evolution going on there.
I'm trying to look for the lobe leaves on this plant, but I don't see any.
Well, we'll go on and we may or may not see them, but maybe this can give our participants some interesting things to do when they go on walks and to look for
Yeah,
the low
definitely.
flower leaves.
I believe, and again, why am I talking about butterflies when we got the expert Anuj here? But in South America, there's a very famous group of butterflies, extremely diverse, with a fantastic, interesting biology called heliconius butterflies. And for those butterflies, they feed exclusively on different species, I believe, of passion vine, of passiflora. In Singapore, we have a native member of this family called Adenia. It's a vine also, not so diverse like passiflora. And that also is the exclusive host plant for a butterfly that's actually related to the heliconius butterflies of South America. So that very tight relationship holds, even though the parties involved are not the same, they're related to their South American cousins.
Exactly.
Is that right, Anuj?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's amazing what Google can tell you. No, I'm just kidding.
It is though. And just to build on that, and in fact, as you said, Shawn, heliconias and the passion fruit family has been studied to great extent, and we know this arms race. So there is an arms race going on between the host and the predator. The predator here is the insect or the caterpillar, which is out there to eat the leaves of the plant. So the plant has to pump up its defenses for not being eaten, whereas the predator wants to eat more and more. So the question is, in this arms race, who would win? Would it be the predator, the insect, or would it be the plant that manages to defend itself and grows healthy and happily? The hidden dynamic is in all this is, would the plant benefit from being eaten by the predator itself? There you are. Who would win?
Meanwhile, while they wait to ponder upon that question, do you want to continue to talk about the butterfly that you were talking about just now?
Next slide.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Bengcha, can you leave it there for the moment? Do
Okay.
you have your indicate pointer or that little flashlight that you can use on?
Yeah, can you see my hand?
Okay, can you wave it at the top where the fruit is?
The fruit.
So
okay.
those three-parted thing, that's the stigma. No. So the three-parted long thing, three arms that stick out from the center, those are the parts that, the petals. Now the stamens are bizarre, the pollen-bearing part. They're those 5 pads that are pointing downwards. You can see the yellow pollen on them.
Yeah.
Okay, and now there's the round fruit, the round bit. Go above those, no, go higher, below the 3 stigma arms.
Yeah.
There, the round ball looks
The
like a
round part,
watermelon. There,
yeah.
Oh,
that's the ovary. That becomes the fruit. And so this is I mean, Bian is going to get a kick out of this. So the fruit is born on a little stalk. That's very unusual in flowers. So it has a special term. It's called the gynophore. It's the stalk that bears the ovary of the flower. And there's very few plants that have it. Another one that you're familiar with and you eat sometimes that has it is the caper. And that caper family is also known for having this stalk on which sits the fruit. Anyway, botanical trivia. Sorry about that. Oh, Bian, thank you for typing that. Yeah. So gynophore. Gyno just refers to the female part of the flower, the gynoecium, and then the phore is the little stalk that it sits on. And maybe people would rather listen to Anuj talk about butterflies.
Aren't they pretty? Yeah, so these are the tawny coasters, and as we spoke, the Passiflora suberosa, which we've been looking at, is a caterpillar food plant, and you will often see these sites. These are social butterflies in the sense that the caterpillars tend to aggregate. Yeah, so if you see sites like these with caterpillars that are spiky, red, maroon, sometimes with shades of yellow and orange, don't be spooked at it. These are the tawny coaster butterflies. Yeah.
So we are already into the next plant. Do you want to?
Let me get back on.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say how you recognize this plant is. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yeah. Okay. So look for plants that climb up with these narrow leaves. They are alternately placed along the stem, and then they have tendrils. Tendrils coming out from beside the leaf, which is what they use to climb also. Or sometimes it may climb onto itself. And yeah, so look out for the tiny, the kind of small fruits and flowers that are growing along the plant. And can like look up close at the structures that we talked about just now. Okay, so now I'm gonna move on.
So as you're walking, Louise, keep walking. Yep. Sorry, otherwise this will just turn into a passiflora talk and not a wildflower talk. But the tendrils, those climby, curly, spring-like things you were talking about, I think so for anybody who sees a plant with tendrils, that's a kind of dead giveaway. It can only be really one of three things. It's either a passion fruit, or it's a member of the cucumber family. It's called the Cucurbitaceae, or it could be a member of the grape family, Vitaceae. Those are the more common ones that actually have these corky, springy tendrils. And Bian, I probably said something wrong, so please correct me.
She found the lobe leaves. Are those
yeah, so I'll just show you, this is the older stem, which is kind of corky, like, which gives it its common name. And yeah, I found another plant with lobe leaves, just as we were talking about it. So you can see the leaves are very different, right? You might think it's a totally different plant, but in fact, it has the same flower, although it's a bit deflated. Yep.
Now, many of you might use a resource, excellent web resource called the Biodiversity of Singapore. That's curated by the Lee Kong Chian Natural History Museum. Is that right, Louise?
Yes, correct.
And Louise is one of the big contributors. So if you go to that resource, you can actually type in a group of plants, and you'll see is the whole array of that species and relatives. So please go to that webpage, and you'll even be able to see, for example, how many different types of passion flowers that we have in Singapore, along with everything else. And again, Louise is one of the big contributors, architects of that whole resource.
Anuj, there are some answers. Sorry, Anuj, there are some answers to your question just now.
Yep.
And okay. And Esther did talk about how the passiflora flower leaves became lobed as they got older. So maybe the participants go to look at some of the contribution from the rest in the chat group. That's excellent. Thank you, everyone. Sorry, Louise.
Okay, no problem. Okay, I'll move on.
Yeah, as we walk along, I'm just glad Shawn mentioned the tendrils, because I think the tendrils are just a very beautiful part of the plant. They look like little springs, and they help the plant to climb, and they're just beautiful coiled structures.
So over here we have another climbing plant, but it's not a passiflora because the leaves are actually arranged in pairs opposite each other. So there are no flowers that I can see, but this probably comes from the coffee family, the Rubiaceae, and it's probably a Pediria fetida. plant, and it's supposed to have leaves that are quite smelly when you crush them. So the common name of this plant is a skunk vine, or I think chicken dung flower or something like that. So let me just smell it.
Well, a very appealing name there, Louise.
It's easy to remember. So it doesn't smell like chicken dung to me. Maybe very faintly. It has a very faint methane kind of smell. Ew, okay, it gets worse. It's like fart. I just crushed the leaf and smelled it. So if you see a plant growing out like this with pairs of leaves, they're quite narrow. You can take a leaf and sniff it. And apparently this plant is used in Hainanese cuisine to make a dessert, like some kind of kueh, because I think the dried leaves are actually black in color, so they are used to color the kueh black in color. I'm not sure if anyone has eaten that particular dessert before.
So they use it for the dye rather than the smell, I assume?
Apparently the smell goes away after cooking, or it's not as strong anymore. But I've never tried it myself, just I found it on the internet. I found some recipes online actually, so it's quite interesting. I think there's a stall in Toa Payoh or something, some Hainanese dessert store that's supposed to have this dessert.
Hey Louise, are there any flowers that you can see?
I don't see any flowers, sadly.
Because sometimes they're pretty, they're kind of a reddish and white, little bell-shaped flower.
I'm not sure if we put a picture on the slide, we may not have, that we can show people.
Criteria?
Yeah, or you can quickly pull up one now.
I will try. Maybe it's better at this and faster.
Yeah, I don't see any flowers, but it's growing very vigorously. As you can see, it's huge bush covering the ground as well. Yeah, okay, I'll just continue walking down.
Yeah, these plants that grow very rampantly, I always kind of describe them as being very weedy because they kind of take over and they grow very fast and they cover everything. So yeah, back to that first concept of what is a weed and how you would define it. Just some food for thought.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, it looks like it may rain soon.
Oh no, so we have to walk faster.
I'm trying my best.
No, this,
Oh, what's this? There's a little, you can't see it. I think it's another passion flower with lobe leaves, but yeah. You managed to get the flower of the Pitira. Oops, sorry. Some of the weeds along the way have disappeared. Okay, there's a Cleome here, Cleome rutidosperma. So you can recognize this plant which grows as a low. Hello, can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you.
Yeah. It grows as a short little plant like this, and it has its leaves are divided into 3 parts. So this is called trifoliate, and they are alternately arranged along the stem. Sorry, let me just adjust the camera. And not much flowers here. There's a very old flower that is developing into a fruit. I'll try to see if there are better flowers along the way. But this plant actually comes from the family, it's now currently placed in the family Cleome. And the family has been shown from DNA studies to be closely related to the Brassicaceae, which is the mustard family. And it's also a family that many of the leafy vegetables they eat come from, like kailan, cai sim, broccoli. So apparently this plant is also eaten as a vegetable in the country, in the place where it originally comes from, which is Africa. And the leaves can be eaten, and apparently they have a bitter taste like mustard.
Do you want
Let's see
me
if we
to,
can.
oh,
Sorry?
Do you want me to pull out the slide to show them the flower of the Cleome?
Yeah, maybe we can show the flower.
So this is what the flower looks like.
Yeah, so it's also quite interesting in shape. It has 4 petals arranged along the top in a fan shape, and then the reproductive parts protrude from underneath the petals. Yeah, so we can look out for it. Okay,
Yeah.
another plant to show here. Go back to my screen. Yeah. It's not very clear, but there's a plant coming out of the fence, and okay, it's not the best, but it's got purple flowers. Maybe we can show a picture on the slide later also. So this is the little ironweed. The scientific name is Cyanthillium cinereum. And you may have seen a post on Facebook by PM Lee Hsien Loong on this plant. He actually posted it on the first day of phase 2. And he was admiring this plant that was growing out of his planter box. So the picture of the plant and its flowers were taken against the blue sky, and he said that it uplifted his spirits. So this is also another very, very common plant, and it can be commonly confused with another common plant called the Cupid's
Shaving brush.
Cupid shaving brush, yes, thank you, which has pink flowers instead of purple, and the leaves of the Cupid shaving brush are lobed, but the leaves of this little ironweed are actually oval in shape, they're not lobed. And another way to tell them apart is the flower of the little ironweed is, okay, it's not very clear, but the flower is kind of half purple and half green. So the green parts are the flower bracts, whereas for the Cupid shaving brush, which is pink in color, the green part takes up more of the flower, and the pink flower parts are actually less don't protrude out so much. So maybe you can go to the slides, and then you can look at the photos of look at the flowers up close, and then you can have a better idea.
Hey, Louise, as you're walking to the next flower, I just wanted to go back to your Cleome that you showed, right? No, don't go back, keep walking.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
I've made some people unhappy by talking too much. Sorry, everybody. The caper family was been called Caparaceae, and the mustard family, Brassicaceae, they're very closely related. And I think Cleome used to be put in the capers, but it's kind of now in between the two families. But essentially, those 3 families are characterized by having a very special type of compound in the leaves called mustard oils. These are the things that give mustard, and you know, sometimes some of the members of that crucifer family that spicy taste. And there's a group of butterflies that specialize in feeding on these cabbage, and so that's why you have these so-called cabbage butterflies or white butterflies, which of course we get the expert Anuj here. But again, another kind of arms race. The very first one actually documented between butterflies and plants, the cabbage butterflies and the cabbage family.
So these are the photos that Anuj put up for the pollinators for Cleome. Anuj, you have anything to say? If not, we'll switch to Louise.
Maybe you can show them after Anuj.
No, please carry on. Yeah.
Okay.
Maybe you can show them the picture contrasting the flowers of the little ironweed with the Cupid shaving brush.
Okay. So this is the little ironweed that Louise was showing just now.
Yeah, this is a better photo of it close up. So as I was saying, the flowers are purple in color, and it's about half purple, half green.
And again, it is the tridex, the single flower, right, as shown in here.
Yeah, so these are it's entirely composed of these flowers. Remember the tridex has two kinds of flowers, so this only has one kind of flower. Although it's from the same family as the tridex, which is the sunflower or dandelion family. Do you have the Cupid shaving brush?
Yeah, the Cupid shaving brush. This one?
Yeah. So this is another plant that you will see very often, which looks very similar on the rightmost side, but the flowers are pink. I know the difference is quite subtle, but the flowers are pink and they don't extend as much down the flower. So the green bracts actually cover up the flowers more. So that's one way to tell them apart. Yep.
Like here, here, and okay.
Yes.
All right. So
okay.
Are you ready to let us show?
Yes,
okay.
Yes. Okay, so now I've arrived at the site that I mentioned earlier on. In case you missed it, there's this patch of open land at the end of the path that I walked down just now. And all kinds of plants have come in because it's just been left empty while the development on the left side goes on until they decide to build something over it. So I personally find such sites quite interesting to watch and see like what kind of species will come in over time, the different varieties that come in. And it was also mentioned just now that plants, these kind of wayside plants or weeds have value in supporting animal communities. So I think I've seen that this site actually supports the bird communities as well. Yeah, so birds that feed on the little fruits or grains of the plants that come in here may in turn be fed on by larger birds that are high up the food chain, like the predatory birds. And so this site actually presents a very early stage of succession, which is defined as the changing over of plant communities. So it'll be interesting to see what will happen in time. We might expect that more as different plants get dispersed in, you get some tree species coming in, and then as those grow up and shade out the area, then different microhabitats will be created as a result, and then you'll get increasing kinds of diversity in this patch of land. But who knows how long it'll be here like that for. Does anyone have anything to add on that?
Yeah, Louise, real quickly, again, sorry, I'll be very quick. That's the kind of question, you know, I mean, it would be kind of like a textbook ecology type case. So if you don't disturb this at all and just leave it, will it actually get less diverse or more diverse? And the flip side is if you actually manage this the way we do our streets, which is to mow them all the time, which is a type of disturbance. So it's classical ecology. How much disturbance is actually optimal for maximizing the diversity? So if you cut it too much, you just whack it, and nothing can really grow and reproduce. But if you let it go, will that allow just a few super competitors to kind of take over and dominate? So then that would become the strategy for how do we manage these open areas. Do you mow them periodically, or do you just let them go and go into, my guess is if you left it, Louise, it eventually comes to a secondary forest.
Yeah, in time. Yeah. Time, I think it will, given enough time. So I just want to show you one plant over here, which is basically taken over the whole place for now. I'm not sure if you can see the yellow flowers that are poking out of the grass. So this is actually a sort of yellow version of the touch bee knot that we saw right at the beginning. Sorry, let me just fix the camera in place. Yeah, so I'm trying to show you one particular flower, but you can see a yellow pom-pom shaped flower. Actually there's a fence, there's a barrier here, so I don't really want to climb over. That's why I'm trying to lean over with my camera.
I can show them your photo in the PowerPoint if you like. Shall I just quickly? And then switch back to you. Okay,
yeah, okay, maybe.
Yeah, this, I'm showing them now. Just a quick look. Then I switch back to you.
Yeah, so this is the pom-pom shaped yellow flower of the water mimosa. The scientific name is Neptunia plana. And it's also called the aquatic sensitive plant. So apparently the leaves of this plant also close up like the touch me not, but apparently they are a bit less responsive, so they close out a bit more slowly.
And you've got a fruit here, right, that you showed?
Oh yeah, so they are this from the legume family, the pea family. So the fruits are like pea pods, and yeah, the flower is pom-pom shaped because it's basically composed of protruding reproductive parts of the flower. So this plant is native to south of USA, and it grows on the surfaces of water bodies and can form floating rafts of plants. And I think that's how it got its name, the water mimosa. And the scientific name Neptunia also brings this to mind because it's named after Neptune, the Roman god of water. And this, a closely related species to this, which is Neptunia oleracea, can actually be eaten as a vegetable, the leaves of it. So I actually ate it in Thailand as a stir-fried vegetable dish. But frankly, it wasn't very nice because it was quite stringy. So I think you have to eat the really young parts of the plant in order for it to be more palatable.
Louise, there's a question from the participant. They want to know how did an aquatic plant get to the hill here?
Oh, so I think this, yeah, that's a good question. I think this soil is very waterlogged as well because it can't really drain properly. So it's retained a lot of moisture. So I think that's sufficient for this plant to actually establish itself and grow so vigorously, so as to exclude almost anything else growing. Yeah.
Louise, may I add something?
Yeah, sure.
Also, a lot of the mimosa fruit capsules have hairs on them, so they would be able to stick onto bird feathers or animal fur and be dispersed that way. So there are many ways that plants can disperse. So that's how plants would be able to get to a place like this. I would imagine it would be birds, but if anyone knows better, please correct me.
Yeah, so that's the interesting thing about these wildflowers or weeds also is the strategies that they have employed in their life cycle to allow them to be so successful in such environments where it's not very, it doesn't look very habitable for other kinds of plants. I think the dispersal strategy is one, like whether they have very light seeds that can be blown very far away, or they have seeds that are easily carried away by birds. Or just their ability to tolerate very nutrient poor soil and harsh exposed conditions with a lot of sunlight. Yeah. Okay. If no one has anything to add, I'll move on.
And Louise, all this diversity developed over just a few months, yeah?
Yeah, it did. Actually, there are a lot more plants in there, but I'm not going to cross over the barrier to go there. But it'll be interesting to do a survey and see how many species can be captured.
Maybe you can turn the corner and go up the little trail.
Yeah, I'll do that. We're running out of time, is it?
Yeah, we're running out of time.
Okay.
It's already 6:36.
Oh my, okay. I'm just going to head down the park connector.
Okay. Meanwhile, well, Louise needs some time to walk there. Anybody has anything to say? I can put up the slide, and then you can talk about some of the things that we put out in the slide.
Yeah, while Louise is walking, Beng, I'll be very quick, and then maybe Bian, you want to maybe speak about some of these cucumber family guys. Traditionally, if anybody has time later, if you Google agricultural weeds, they're also amazing because many of these plants, because for most of human history, weeds were manually removed, And so weeds, some of these agricultural weeds, has found a way to mimic the crop plant. So rice, weeds in rice fields look like rice, or weeds in wheat fields look like wheat. And they have to reproduce before the crop plant, otherwise they'll be, they won't have a chance to propagate. So the way humans have dealt with this in an industrial way is to develop a lot of these herbicides to kill chemical weed killers. And industrial agriculture is one of the big reasons why across the world, insect numbers have declined to a frightening level, and that has had knock-on implications. Bird numbers are falling, and it's been this. They're calling this the insect Armageddon, and much of this, in a way, has been in response to have this kind of technological response to age-old problems of managing crops, and it's been this vicious cycle. And so again, if you look that up afterwards, after Louise's talk, I think it'd be very interesting to see how our relationship with weeds has in a way led to the collapse of biodiversity, unfortunately, across much of the world. Yours, Louise and Bian. Thank you, everybody, once again for participating today.
Okay, I'm just gonna head over to the end of the park connector.
Yeah, I think she's going to look for a surprise flower. Meanwhile, maybe Anuj, you want to say a little bit about the butterfly. I'm going to show the slide that you have contributed about the longest proboscis in the world.
Okay, sure. So just to reiterate, proboscis are the mouth parts of insects like butterflies. These are straw-like structures which they use to feed nectar and other liquids. So here you see two butterflies of the Hesperidae family. They have proboscis lengths which are 3 times their body length, right? Very unusual. So a mouth part that is 3 times longer than their body. So proboscis length here is about 5 centimeters long. And they use these to dig into all sorts of flowers, even gingers that have very long tubes, corolla tubes. So yeah, this is a fun fact that Singapore has butterflies with some of the longest proboscis in the world. Tell your American colleagues about that.
Okay, Louise, have you found your flower?
It's not in good shape, but I'll just briefly show you, and then we can show the PowerPoint slide again.
Okay, you can show
so I actually want to show you a orchid, a wild orchid that's growing. I don't know if you can see like the thin stalks that are clusters of stalks that are pointing up, and along the fence. Sorry, give me a moment.
It's okay, you're too excited to see it.
the gimbal got excited and decided to flip. Yeah.
But what do you think that I have orchids on the ground in just this grass patch? Well, the grass cutter don't even see, they just completely mow everything, right?
Actually, there used to be more along the park connector, the grass immediately adjacent to the park connector, but it's all been mowed away already. So what's left is the ones inside this little fenced up area that they haven't gotten to.
You're not climbing over, right?
I don't think that's advisable.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you can see the remnants of them against the longkang barrier. Should I climb over?
I don't...
Never mind. Yeah, maybe just show them the picture on the
Nature Society has insurance, Louise.
Really? Does it?
Yeah.
Shawn, the next trip you will do and you'll climb over. I'll show them the flowers.
Yeah, maybe show them on the PowerPoint.
Okay, it's now on the screen now.
Yeah.
You want to talk a little bit about grass flower, the 2 types that you have taken the photo from?
Yeah, so this particular one is the grass orchid. It's got really small flowers that are barely thumbnail sized, and yeah, so this is quite a common species that just springs up around. Sorry, it's not that common a wildflower species, I think. So when I saw it over here, I was quite excited. And And compared to this species, there's a second species called Eulophia spectabilis. So the one we're looking at, sorry, is the Eulophia graminea, which is called the grass orchid, because the leaves are long and narrow like grass blades. And then the second species that we have in Singapore is called Eulophia spectabilis. And how you differentiate them is that the Eulophia spectabilis has slightly larger flowers and they never open fully. So as you can see in the photo here, it's kind of crumpled up. And that one is much rarer. It's actually critically endangered in Singapore. As for the Eulophia graminea that we are looking at now, the evidence at the moment is, I mean, we're still not very sure on whether it's native to Singapore or not. So for a long time, it was thought that it's not native. It got here much later on. But then a paper that was published in Nature in Singapore in 2011 suggested that it may actually be native because they reasoned that Singapore is actually within the range of the distribution range of this species across the world, the region. And in Singapore, it's also been recorded in habitats like beachside vegetation and forest fringes, which have been around in Singapore from the beginning. So I'm just going to show you a fruit of the flower, of the plant, if I can find it.
Okay. I think due to the time constraint, this will be the last plant already.
Yeah, probably.
And maybe if those of you who can have time, you want to stay behind somewhere. I'm so sorry we exceeded the time.
Yeah,
okay,
so this is the fruit pot of the orchid. So it's actually typical of any other orchid species. It has dry pods like this, which split open. And inside you have many, many tiny seeds. So you can't see them clearly because they are so tiny. They are basically like dust. And they get blown away, carried away by the wind. So they are also very effective dispersers in this sense. So that now my fingers are totally covered by the dust like seeds. Yep. So yeah, I think that this shall be the last plant that we'll talk about since we don't have enough time.
Yeah. So I think this would be the end of the virtual walk, but we could take maybe 5 minutes for question. What do the rest of you think? Bian, Anuj, and Shawn, are you all right to take question for about 5 minutes?
Yeah, we're happy to stay. And the other thing is, for those of you, again, thank you all for joining us. We're still trying to work out the bugs and this whole format and everything. Bugs, no pun intended. But if you're happy with this type of walk, I mean, I can see ourselves doing this maybe more often. Not always loading it on you, of course, Louise. But you know, and then we can make this even when we revert back to in-person walks, we could do these virtual ones as well. Thank you.
And may I add, Shawn, if you would like to join more of these walks and activities, please do. For those of you who are not members, please do consider becoming a member and helping to support our advocacy work. Thank you.
Yeah. So
I hope
any questions for Louise and the rest? If you feel free to exit anytime, but if you have questions, we are happy to stay around 5 to 10 minutes to answer all the questions. And I'll pull out the slide which Anuj was talking about just now about the bee that pollinates the passiflora. And like Bian say, support Nature Society if you can. Just a pitch. This year, if you donate to Nature Society, the government will match it 1-for-1. Correct, Shawn?
That's right, Beng Chiak. Yes, thanks to the Singapore Bicentenary Fund.
So it's a good time to donate to not just Nature Society, any society,
any charity. That's right.
Yeah, if you donate this year, that they will double their donation. So please do consider not just us, but other charity too.
I'm happy to say a few words and then others feel free. Yeah, so many of you would have heard about bees in trouble. Obviously, they're very important as pollinators. What do we do without being invaded by bees? I think a common misconception, shall we say, is that all bees stink. and therefore being invaded comes to our mind. Well, many bees don't sting, and therefore they should be very welcome as neighbors and settlers in our gardens because of the services they provide. In fact, there are a lot of champions for bee conservation in Singapore. If you're interested, please reach out to Kang Min, who is the Butterfly Group chair, and she's on this chat, or to any of us, and we can tell you more how to reach out to them. There are now bee-friendly boxes that can be put up, and through that you can encourage more bees to be present in your gardens. Last but not the least, there are only a few bees that actually sting. Those tend to be the honeybee types that form these giant beehives. So yes, be careful of them, but many others are actually our friends, and let's try to welcome them as much as we can.
Thank you, everyone. So we'll see
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
We will read your feedback, and then we'll organize another one soon. I can see a lot of you are quite happy with this. So thank you, and have a good weekend, and stay safe. And thank you, everyone, for participating. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Hey, Louise, thank you. Well done. Amazing.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Louis.